Aren't you tired of painting boring looking 40k weapons? No more! Because today I'll show you 3 visually striking and interesting ways to paint your Warhammer 40k weapons that you can adapt for any army, and that are still pretty easy to achieve because I will break them down for you. You're welcome, Thomas. Starting with weapon number 1. Different version of the regular power sword, more evilish, evil. On the black base coat I take dark sand and start sketching in the lightning bolts. I use this ivorish color, so there's still a pretty high value, but not totally white. For the patterns having shaky hands, here is pretty good. My tip for this is to paint 2 main lines going somewhat parallel to each other and then connect them in different places. Avoid symmetry as much as possible because nature, random, mostly. Try to be as random as possible. 2 of these 3 weapons are inspired by the work of a miniaturista who's like a very good Spanish painter, and his effects are pretty famous and pretty awesome, but he uses the airbrush a lot and I didn't want to do that. So the question is, can I do the same effect without an airbrush? Guess we're gonna find out. The next step, I'm gonna do something a little bit dangerous. I'm gonna thin down dark sand quite a lot to a thin glaze consistency. I have a very useful cheat sheet for consistency with visual cues you can follow. So you'll find that downloadable file in the link in the description. I apply this thin glaze where I would have airbrushed, so near the power field generators and near the lightning bolts in the first half of the blade. You need to be real careful here with how you apply the paint because how thin it is, especially because of how much white pigment is in there. Just thin the paint like I showed you on screen, remove the excess, leaving just a little bit of paint on your brush. Then what you're gonna have to do is use as few brush strokes as possible. The more brush strokes you use, the more you will run the risk of moving the wet paint, causing holes and chalkiness. Instead, use the brush to apply the glaze in a couple of strokes, aiming down towards the maximum point of light, aka near the power field thingies. Let it dry, can't stress it enough, let it dry, goddammit, and repeat one more time if needed. Then I take pale sand and retrace the lighting pattern to get back some of that definition between the lightning and the light it produces. I then use a mix of red ink, Liquitex, and deep red from AK Interactive to create a red filter. Make sure, like I said, make sure that the previous layer is dry. I then reapply the pale sand, which I guess you could use white at this point, to then unsheath my secret weapon. Listen. I hate these paints, but now that I know how to use them properly, it kind of changed my mind. I take Fluor Red and I apply a final, small, very thin glaze to make the whole effect pop even more and give that El Miniaturista look. Be careful because fluoro paints are kind of bad. Pigment in there is unstable. Like me, shake it well, thin it down properly, wick the excess off your brush, and apply a very thin layer. Go in with 2 thin coats this time, but these are really thin coats. And there you go. Looks kind of nice. Done it. Moving on to weapon number 2. Here's something a bit easier and quick. Chainsword with hazard stripes. Starting with this little hedge highlighting of dark gray, which turns out to be completely useless because I will then painting over it, so just skip it. Let's paint some hazard stripe instead, I guess. I go in with this yellow from AK Interactive because it has pretty good coverage. All the colors will be put in the description if I remember. The truth about hazard stripes is that they're really way more forgiving than you might think, as long as you don't make this one mistake. Never, I said never, paint them too far apart because they will look way off. Try to paint 6 or 7 stripes for each side of a blade, at least for a Space Marine size chainsword. Keeping the angle at the same angle which again, it seems hard. It's actually somehow really forgiving. So even if my hazard stripes are kind of wonky and are not perfect at all, at the end of the day, that's gonna be okay as long as you have enough stripes in there. And as long as you find a way to add some interesting detail. Before I show you that though, I must show you how to paint the stripes on the other side of the blade. It's pretty simple. I'm just continuing the stripe up into the smaller part using a straight line, abandoning the angle to make just my life easier, basically. This way I have a guide for the other side where I can start painting them with the same general angle I used before. You can go in with black and polish whatever line you're not loving too much, but my suggestion, to be honest, is to focus on the general effect rather than how perfectly painted are the single lines. Off camera, I filled in the metallics, and now I'm gonna add a little bit of weathering. First, I very delicately go over the edges of the upper side of the blade, creating that chipping effect. And after trying with a dry brush, a ruined brush, I settle in for, guess what? A sponge, yeah. Just be very delicate with it because they can be kind of hard to deal with sometimes. I then reinforce everything with my detail brush and voila! Nice and easy. No need for highlighting, no need for nothing. You can leave it like this. Painting highlights on this type of swords is just, you don't need to, mate. So just do it like this, okay? Okay? Trust me, I know what I'm doing, right? And last but not least, we have weapon number 3. I start again with the technique I used as a substitute for the airbrush. This time though, I didn't want to go directly with an off-white, so I instead used orange. Like before, I thin it down to a thin glaze consistency, letting the paint pull in the recesses of the sculpted text first, and then actually apply the paint after wicking off the axis. I'm using long brush strokes to avoid streaks and chalkiness, which at some point you can see a bit because this paint is kind of weird, but don't worry, this can happen, don't stress it. 90% of it is gonna be covered by the other parts of the effects, so chill bro, chill, come on. Next I take Mephiston Red and I thin it slightly less than the layer before, and I glaze it in the shadows where I have black primer, and I also glaze it in the orange part where you can see the black primer showing through, so to achieve a kind of nice transition between orange and red and black. You can see here I do in fact touch the wet paint quite a bit, very stupid of me. Like I said, the more wet the paint is, the less you should touch it. Here I'm kind of stippling around and just goofing around with it. But I guess in this case it doesn't hurt too much because those irregular patterns are gonna play into the lava effect. I then go in with pale sand in the recesses of the text and the power field thingy. Remember to let these more wet steps dry off completely before you apply the next layer, because otherwise it's gonna be a mess. Then I go in with my 2 secret weapons, 2 fluo paints, yellow and orange. And I use both of them. First the yellow and then the orange, kinda glazing them and mixing them a little bit together. Then to build up the burnt illusion, I'm gonna use a dry brush with some tenebrous gray or black. It can do the trick, really. I try to focus my dry brush on the pointy part of the blade and on the edges, right? So try to be real careful. If you feel like you're not in control with the dry brush, as you go near the center of the blade where the text is, swap the dry brush for a detail brush. And after adding a little bit of a dark gray hedge highlight, I am ready for the final touch, where I repeat the pale sand and fluo paint glaze process, and you get this amazing thing. So just go really slow, try to be real safe with these fluor paints because they can be a bitch to apply with the brush, but you can do it. I'm really happy with this result. But if you want to up your game even more and try the cool technique all the pros do, I bet you're thinking it's kind of hard to pull off. Take a look at this video. here. And you'll thank me later, Bill, and see you there. Or you'll see past me. I mean, it was the same day, so I guess, but it has been a while. It's gonna be